Several members joining us today on Zoom. So just ask those members to keep their cameras online. I think we've got Councillor Salinger and Councillor Brown joining us on Zoom shortly. And welcome, Councillors Salinger and Brown who are joining us today, understanding orders 14.1. These members and any other members that join us can take part in the discussion at the meeting but may not vote. Noting that we'll be rolling straight into a full council meeting immediately after this meeting. So ask that the live stream be started, please. The emergency procedures are up on the screen. I think everyone in the room is familiar with them, but if in doubt, follow the lead of our Democratic Services team. Mobile phones, make sure they are switched to silent, and we'll bring up the opening formalities on the screen. Mea karakia tātou, tēnei o te haukai nei o taku tapawai, ko te haukai nuku, ko te haukai rangi, ko te haukai a tau tūpuna a tāne nui a rangi. Ka piki ti ai ki ngā rangi tū haha, ki te tiho o mānono. Ka rokohino atu rā, ko I o mātua kore anaki, ka tikinga mai ngā kiti o te wānanga. Ko te kiti tuauri, ko te kiti tuatia, ko te kiti aranui. Ka tiritiri a ka pōpō a, ka putu mai I hou, ko te I rā tangata, ki te whaio, ki te ao marama, tihei mauri ora. Received apology for absence from Councillor Briggs and noting that Mayor Barry has an early departure depending on what time the meeting goes till. Are there any other apologies for the meeting or early departures? No, great. So I'll move that motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Edwards. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Declare that carried. Before we move on to item number 3, public comment, we'll just get a quick update from officers on a small issue, and then we'll move into the public comment section, and then we'll obviously go back to officers to address any other questions that are raised through public comment. Kia ora, thank you, Nathan.
Just want to speak to one minor error that's in the draft of the proposed district plan, and that is the subdivision standard for the rural lifestyle zone. In the draft of the proposed district plan, it shows that that's 0.5 hectares is the minimum allotment size in that zone for subdivision. That's supposed to be 1 hectare, which is in line with what was in the draft that was consulted on last year.
Kia ora, thank you, Nathan. Any members got any questions on that particular issue? Obviously, we can come back to that as well. If not, no, great. Thank you, Nathan. We'll now move into public comment. Up first, we've got Ken Jackson and Jacinda, both coming up together but speaking separately, I believe, or... Yep. Cool, so you've got 3 minutes each, so 6 minutes in total. And if you leave some time, we can address some questions at the end there. And if you just push the microphone on the right-hand side, that'll turn the microphone on for us. Kia ora.
Right, good morning. I'd just like to talk on behalf of myself and a bit on the Rongorongo Station as well about the outstanding natural landscapes. A few of us have been working with Hutt City Council and had some site visits from both of Miscall who had done the mapping on ONLs. To my understanding, 3 of the properties have now had the ONLs areas adjusted to allow those properties enough scope to hopefully function productively, which leaves another 3 properties unresolved at this point. My personal block that I had a site visit on, of which I had offered another suitable area that could potentially be included in the ONLs, provided another small area of my flats was excluded. The result after that consultation was that I ended up with another 5 hectares included in the ONLs. I have since resolved this situation with Tim, and it is now back to the original map. I had also mapped 140 hectares, approximately 1/3 of our family block, that I thought would be consistent with the ONL's criteria, but it was mostly rejected by both of Miscall. We are now left with less than 10% of our property with no ONL restrictions. The other property, Rongorongo Station, has been inundated with overlay over overlay. to such an extent that apparently they are probably the most restricted property in New Zealand. They are prepared to retire 80% of their property from farming or possibly more, but they just need approximately another 100 hectares out of 2,500 hectares removed from the ONL overlays. This area is predominantly grassland and not in the coastal overlay, and the bulk of it is not even visible to the general public, and I don't believe that is an unreasonable request. I would also like to note that the open space overlays, which is mainly council land, are not as restrictive as the outstanding natural landscapes. Finally, it has just been brought to our attention that sites of significance to Maori overlays are now included in this final draft plan without any consultation at all, and it will come into effect in February next year along with most of the other overlays. We would like to continue working with the council until we can come to a fair resolution. That's all for me.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for this opportunity today and to listening to us. Obviously, for some of us, this is very emotional. Let's put it in its basic form. We're trying to protect the environment, but it's also land grabbing with no financial help, no rates, rebates. What we're saying is, yes, we understand that you can still, in the future, apply for consent to do things on your property. What we're trying to explain is that with the overlays, it will be too restrictive financially. You're going to have to get landscape architects, you're going to have to bring iwi consultation, and you're going to have to use lawyers, you're going to have to use planners and people that apply, that know the laws and know the environmental laws. So just to do one little thing, we're talking simple things. Put some beehives on the property. You won't be able to do it without consent and without all of those conditions. So that's what we're saying, that without excluding a very small portion of our property that is not going to affect the landscape at all, no damage to it, it'll still be in its natural state, we could not ever develop the farm business opportunities. We have removed 99% of our stock and let our property regenerate into native and to natural environment to work towards nature and sustainability, not work against it. So we've already done all of that ourselves with no help or push from anybody. And with that, we're talking about, we want to develop into ecotourism with buggy tours. We want to do nature walks, hunting tours, beekeeping, developing self-contained glamping sites, a holiday accommodation and a function centre for cost-effective self-catering weddings. So these are the things that we'd like to develop as business opportunities on the farm that we have not either financially or time-wise been in a position to do as up to today that we're doing now. But with all of these overlays, that could become just a nothing. Our rates are most likely the highest in the Hutt, and how are we expected to pay for rates if you cannot make an income off your property? It comes down to basics. Now, our family are just asking for some compromise, and we realise there is a process, but at the moment, under the process, we're getting virtually no compromise that will make us be able to function as a business and as a viable financial entity, just to pay insurance and rates without even trying to, we do not get paid an income, anyone in the family, off the farm. We work for free and we have other jobs until we can develop business opportunities. So it's not about us making a small fortune. And we have worked very closely with the Hutt Council, DOC Regional Council for the last 20 to 30 years. We have developed a car park out there at the river mouth that the farm paid for ourselves for public use. Doc came to the party in Hutt Council and put a public toilet there. We have developed the cycleway that we looped into the Rimataka Forest, the Rimataka Incline, to make a whole thing to help the Hutt Valley in the region. Do you know how much money we make out of it? $0. We do not charge anyone any excess for that cycleway. So we're not about, making lots of money. We're about, yes, giving some public access that's controlled, but also then being able to develop it as a, farm and business entity. So that's what we're asking is please, with this process, yes, it's getting, put through, it's a government initiative, but we need some workaround and compromise over it because, it's just not sustainable at this level for our property. So, yeah, thank you for your consideration.
Kia ora, thank you. We are out of time, but obviously quite an important topic, so I'm more than happy to extend the time a little bit. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, just to do with the restrictions you mentioned there, you mentioned, for example, you wouldn't be able to put in beehives without a consent. Is that advice you've received from our officers, or is that your understanding from reading the plan?
Understanding that with pretty well anything you'd want to do, you'd have to do consent.
We can check with them.
Yeah, and
thank
get tick all the boxes under the consent process that would have to, meet these requirements. Even like putting a house site in with the mouldy overlays, you couldn't put, basically we're looking into it, but there's possibility you couldn't put a foundation in. If it's, and what we're saying is we can get to the consent process, but we've had to spend a lot of money to get there to be told no under all the restrictions. So we would have to spend money to get to the consent process, and a lot of it. That's where the restriction comes in. It's not that you can't apply for consent to do things. And there is a likelihood that some of it. We have the river is moving, a bit like Hutt, we've all got, flooding issues. So we've got 2 holiday houses that we've renovated that it's within 5 metres of the front door now, the river. It's moved 20 to 40 metres in the last 15 years. We might have to relocate those houses one day. Well, where do we relocate them? How do we relocate them? If we've got a function centre and we need accommodation, more accommodation, we need accommodation for workers or family, how do you do it, And obviously it has to be done so it still looks nice in the landscape, but how do you do it with all of those restrictions and afford to do it?
And Ken, you mentioned that you've met with officers and sort of spoke about your specific property.
Yep.
And they put forward something that you were happy with, but have gone back to the previous. Just wondering if you could talk a bit more about.
There was a small, on my personal block. I had a site visit from both from the school, and I offered what I thought would be better, was more visual to Forest Park, part of my hill, but I need a little bit on my flats excluded, so I was happy to put in that, but I wanted that taken out. They ended up just adding my bit that I had suggested on the hill, but not taking the bit out on my flats. I have since resolved that with Tim, and they have now taken that bit out. But
so you're happy with that?
Happy
is probably not the right
word.
word. Sorry.
I'd be happier with my flats taken out. I'd be happy with the hill in, but my family block is 450 hectares, I think, and I offered 140 hectares. Well, I mapped it. I went through. It doesn't take much to map it up, which I thought was perfect for those sort of overlays, but we ended up getting a very small amount.
Cool. And Jacinda, have you met with our officers and spoke about the ONLs and the issues you're raising now? Have you spoken to our officers about those specific issues?
So they did come and do another site visit. There was some, what we believe, maybe they don't believe, Bothamiscal, about some ambiguity because we're in the Rimataka catchment zone. That's why a lot of our river flats up the river that's out of public eyesight is included, because it's considered the sacred waters coming from your Rimataka catchment and flows through our property, so we end in it. Now, to say that the river flats and the river shingle, gravel, but the actual river we are willing to put that in. We don't want to do anything with that. All we want is the land on the site at the bottom of the hills. We're not talking about the hills. We don't want to touch escarpments. We don't want to create, rock falls or any of that. It's just, the little bit of land on the side of the river. And if you saw our property, you'd see there's very little functional land. Most of it's on a hill like this around Wellington. So there's very restrictive stuff we can do, anyway. You can't stick a house up on a hill like this, really. We don't want to. So that's what we're asking. We're asking for, there are certain areas up the river flats. There's areas around the main, what we call the main homestead block, which has always had over, 10 or more buildings on it. So they're the areas that we're saying where it's already built, it's already got human touch, it's grassland, so, could that be excluded? It was excluded. They did a little tweak around it, but then with the new Māori overlay, it basically blows what was excluded out anyway. It then becomes you lost one and, gained one and lost two sort of thing. So that's what we're saying. We're not really getting anywhere at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We'll get officers to address. I've seen Tim writing some notes down as you've been speaking, so we'll get them to address it. And it could well be we may need to pause the meeting and that you guys just have a meeting off to the side to sort of address your individual issues. But yeah, thank you for your time.
That's all right. Could go to another
And we'll
meeting.
now move on to the next speaker, who's Craig Innes, who's requested 2 slots to speak for himself personally and the Wainuamata Rural Community Association. Thank you for joining us, Craig. You know the deal. You've got 6 minutes, and if you can try and leave some time within that 6 minutes for questions, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay, kia ora koutou. So my first submission's on the public comment is on behalf of the association. So I refer to page 23 of your agenda, and you'll see that in the table there it says rural zone changes. And so this appears to be the only zone where none of the changes are actually outlined. All it does is refer to an earlier meeting, and the minutes of that meeting are not available. So it's actually, it's basically a blank check. We can't see what it is you're proposing in terms of rural zone changes. And so it's not clear what changes have been made, and I'm getting a lot of communications from people who are confused by this, by your process. On page 7, staff are asking to make non-substantial changes, including changes to the maps. There's very little trust that that will be done, that any changes will be limited to non-substantial. The clearest example would be that half-hectare change, or typo, as I say. If that hadn't been noticed, apparently it would have been passed through into your rules. So one of the clearest problems for owners or for people trying to engage with this process, one of the most likely links people will try to click onto for your maps, that's not working at the moment, is going to the Hutt City Council portal, and it's asking for a Hutt City Council password. So if you want to see the maps, you have to actually think about it and go and find another link. I will to state to anybody who's interested in that point, click on the link in this agenda and you'll get to the right spot. But if you try and click it on one of the other main avenues people will try, it won't go to the right place. Page 13 and page 20, the slope assessment, that appears to be very inconsistent. And it's inconsistent at detail. So if you zoom in close on a property, it does not appear to accurately correlate to slope at a detail level, and it's also not accurate at an overall level. It's only applying to some parts of the district and not others, and there's no clear methodology of what's been followed in that slope assessment. So I would like to again like to ask that the DP is withdrawn. The process has not been sensible or in any way, and basically it's been farcical. landowners, people affected, are still very confused about what it is you're proposing, and this has been from the day one with the letters that were sent out that did not identify how the proposals were going to affect people's properties. I would also repeat that my objection to the meeting where assurances from this committee were edited out of the video recording. And also, I would like to point out that I requested under the Goima the submissions for the process, and that was not supplied. And I was supplied about 30, 40 submissions, and that's out of 300 according to your own documents. And now the Ombudsman is investigating that issue. So that's my comment from the association.
We'll pause there for questions before we move on. Any questions there? Mayor Barry?
Thanks, Craig. You mentioned you're speaking on behalf of landowners who've raised these concerns on the process.
Yes.
How many landowners and who are they?
Well, I won't.
You don't need to give names, but like where are they from in Wainui, and how many? I mean, it's just
Okay. Well, there's been so right across the rural area in Wainui, so Wainumara North, Moores Valley, and Coast Road.
yeah, but how many? So because you're saying that they've all got concerns around the
Oh, no, no,
process.
no. Well,
So,
I'm
so
not
how,
saying-
how many of them
No, I'm not
have
saying-
expressed those concerns? 'Cause
Okay,
that's what you're
not
saying.
saying all of them. I would have had probably about maybe 10, 20 contacts, maybe.
And you'll be able to, if you've got examples of those concerns, you can give to us just to demonstrate it.
No, I won't provide those. I'll suggest to them that they want to talk to you. Right, first of all, the most common one is, how is my property affected? And that has been from day one, because when the original letters were sent out, it didn't identify properties, owners of multiple properties. We couldn't tell which one was affected. And also people who were owners of one property couldn't see, they were not given clear instructions or clear details of how to work it out what part of their property was affected and how it was to be affected. Having a number of, quite a common concern is they can't read the rules. They find it very difficult to follow. For instance, really you want a nice, concise little paragraph for each zone, you know, just in plain English saying, oh, subject, just certain area, subdivision, and assessments according to sort of overlays according to slope and things like that. That would actually help people a lot. But as it stands, they have to sort of go to a multi-part, read the document like a multi-part. Okay, so then this is, these are the rules specific to my property, and then I have to go look at, for instance, I have to go look at a subdivision chapter. It'd be really helpful if everything was put together in one concise, reasonably easy paragraph for each zone, which doesn't seem to be the case at the moment.
We'll get Office to speak to it soon, but one thing we will be doing before consultation starts is people will be able to go to the district plan, type in their address and see all the rules that are relevant just to their property, rather than clicking around. And
Yes.
I completely agree with you, it's hard at the moment to navigate the district plan if you're unfamiliar with it. But between now and February, when it goes out to consultation, that new tool will be built into the district plan that you'll be able to do exactly what you're suggesting.
Yes, and that will be very helpful.
Yeah, that's what the same process that other councils that are already using the e-plan already
Yes,
do,
but I
which
mean,
I'm sure you're familiar with.
really, that should have been made available at the beginning, so people could have just, you know, had that sort of. It's relatively simple in a database planning type of way to actually make that.
So that will be live before people get letters notifying them. And on the consultation front, everyone that is having a major change will be getting a letter.
Well, that is excellent. That's
And
good.
that will say, go here, type in your address and do exactly what you're suggesting. So,
Yes.
were there any further questions on the first submission before we move to the personal submission? No, great, Craig. If you want to do your personal submission, obviously, if there's any overlapping points, we've got those already. So just your
Okay.
submission. Thank you.
Okay, so my next point is So there's Wainuiomata North on the eastern side. So I'm only talking about the eastern side, which is above like Y Street, that side, and also Upper Moores Valley. That is all rural lifestyle. Well, it was proposed for rural lifestyle. It really isn't suitable for that. I mean, half hectare would have been totally out of the question. 1 hectare is still not really sensible for that area. It's really not technically possible, really. And it looks to me like a slope overlay is being applied to everybody because of areas like that. It would be far more sensible just to put proper zoning, sensible zoning for rural lifestyle. And that really shouldn't include very large properties. It's sort of fairly clear in the national planning standards. You shouldn't be encouraging chopping up of general rural. So in Moores Valley, the slope overlay is being applied to general rural and rural lifestyle, and that seems to be very inconsistent because it doesn't apply in the Coast Road. Why is it general rural properties in Moores Valley have been getting a slope assessment? There's no clear reason for that. So I also like to record that I requested the outstanding natural features and outstanding natural landscapes GIS data, and that was refused. And those areas do not appear to be consistent with the proper policy, especially if you compare it to, say, the bush-clad hills above East Harbour. So it seems that bush-clad, publicly owned land above East Harbour is not getting anywhere near the same restrictions as private scrub, which is not visible to the harbour. So it just doesn't seem to make much sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got one first before I open it up. So just want to go back to the slope stability overlay, slope assessment overlay around that Moores Valley area. Are you saying you don't think it should apply to those hills between Moores Valley and Wainuiomata North?
Well, if it's going to apply, it needs to be consistent with actual slope, and it needs to be district-wide. It doesn't do either at the moment. And really, I think how you should address the eastern part of Wainuiomata North and into Moores Valley, I think you should zone it appropriately. So I think general rurals or if you're going to reduce it down to 1 hectare, that's just not suitable. You'd have to get maybe another a second tier of rural lifestyle, perhaps, with some sort of ability to make much more sense of the area. But even so, you really can't put like roads and 1 hectare subdivisions down way up those hills.
So your issue is that there's some carve-outs of the slope stability on public dock land that isn't mapped, and you think they should have been mapped for consistency?
Well, no, it's just not consistent. You've only got the northern part of a district. Really, you've just got round Eastbourne, round the Hutt, and round Wainuiomata, and then not everywhere else doesn't have that slope overlay, and it just doesn't seem to be consistent.
We'll get officers to address it, but I'm pretty sure we have mapped the whole city. The only bits that have been excluded is the dock and the public land up in Belmont Hill Reserve, like the reserves up in the hill and out the back. The dock land hasn't been mapped because it's dock land. But my understanding looking at the maps is everything else has been mapped. It's not just Wainuiomata that's had the slope overlay, it's the whole city. But we'll get officers to just correct that if I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure looking at the overlays, we have done all the slopes everywhere in the city. That's slopey. Were there any questions? Other questions? Councillor Mitchell?
Sorry if I'm paraphrasing you here, Craig, but you made a comment to the effect when you were talking about North Wainuiomata that those properties couldn't possibly be subdivided down further. What did you mean by that they couldn't possibly be?
Well, just simply, it's just simply one hectare. If you divide that up into those areas up into 1 hectare lots, I mean, it'd be just doesn't seem to be how can you address the issues of slope and well, it just you trying to put an access way up to the top, things like that. It does seem to be very problematic. I think if you were to allow something different to general rural for those areas, you would have to have a second tier rural lifestyle, I would think.
Any further questions? No. Thank you, Craig. We'll get officers to address some of the points that you've raised there. I can see Tim jotting things down as well. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. To any members of the public, obviously, you're more than welcome to join us for the meeting. The meeting is also being live streamed on the Council's YouTube page, so you're more than welcome to watch it as well through that mechanism. Cool. We will move on to item number 4, conflicts of interest declaration. Do any members have any conflicts that they would like to declare? Easy. We'll move on to item number 5, recommendations to Te Kaunihera o Te Awa Kairangi. Following this meeting, on page 7 of our agenda, the district plan review, proposed district plan, I'd like to ask Tim Johnson, our head of planning, and Nathan Gerd, our policy planning manager, to speak to the item. Kia ora, please join us at the table.
Thank you. Just by way of introduction for this report, which I'll largely take as read, that this is, I guess, the culmination of several years of work now for the council and the council officers. Rather than presenting the detail of the proposed district plan, which obviously there's a lot of that, we've tried to focus on what those key changes are from the draft that we engaged on last year, and then what the process is if the council approves the draft for notification in the new year. That process is the standard plan change process that many people will be familiar with, but just on a much larger scale. We have a 2-year time frame to complete that from notification to the final decisions. As an indication of, I should say, we're likely to use the vast majority of that 2-year time frame, just looking at what other councils have gone through with similar processes. As an indication of the scale of these sorts of things, Wellington City Council notified their proposed district plan in the middle of 2023. They received about 500 submissions, plus further submissions. And that, for their process, they've included 11 different hearing streams over the last 2 years, which they've nearly completed now. So yeah, they're going to use all of the 2-year time frame that they had as well. Yeah, just also wanted to make note of that minor corrections recommendation that we do have the ability to make minor corrections. For the most part, those will be things like spelling mistakes, formatting. If we find grammar that doesn't make sense, obviously it's a very large document, so those sorts of things slip through. But for any corrections, we will keep a record of what those corrections are, so that it's fully transparent where those changes have been. And that includes to the maps for the outstanding natural features and landscapes, to make sure that those are up to date with the most recent assessments that have been done by Boffa-Miskell with the landowners.
And just one question on clarity on that. Any minor changes will only occur between now and when consultation starts. There wouldn't be any changes made after that. If a member of the public says, hey, there's a typo here, we're not going to touch it at that point? Or
yes,
still...
that's correct. Once it's notified, then no changes can be made until decisions are made on those provisions.
Okay, cool. We can probably tweak the wording of the recommendation, but I think it would be great if we could get a report back to this committee next year sometime, just outlined literally a list of any tracked changes of the district plan, just so it's really transparent and open everything that's changed between what is in the document right now in front of us and what goes out the door in February. I think would be really useful, just so it's really transparent. Cool. So I'm not sure if you were done or have I interrupted?
No, that was it for the introduction. Tim, did you have anything to add?
I was just going to respond to a couple of points that came up in public comment, but I must admit you've probably covered them between all of us, which is important to point that we're not actually consulting until the 4th of Feb. So, you know, while it's hopefully get a good decision today, it's important that people can start looking, but it's after the 4th of Feb is when everything will be ready, and that's when people should be scrutinising and get their submissions ready. I understand it's confusing, the district plan. I appreciate that, but I will say we follow what's called the National Planning Standards. So if you look at all the district plans, they are now the same standard. So we're pretty limited in terms of how we display it, but we are following that. We will, and as we did in the draft, we will respond to all inquiries we get about people who have queries about needing some help to understand it. We need to be a bit careful because we can explain, but we can't lead people. But in addition, as part of our consultation, we'll have what's called a Friends of Submitter service. So we will have someone independent that people can ask for help, and they can help them form that submission. In relation to the slope assessment report, I'll just say there are, behind all our evidence bases, long, detailed technical reports that will all be made available as well, which might address some of Mr. Innes's questions. But just checking the maps quickly, effectively the slope assessment area covers our urban area. It's right, it doesn't cover all of the rural areas, but it's focused where we are likely to get development. There are already quite strict controls on what can happen, as we've heard, in terms of our rural areas, so that might explain some of that. In terms of the other comments about beehives, just a point of clarity, we did make a late change, which is in there, about permitting small areas of beehives on sites, 50 square metres. If that isn't large enough, then we can obviously raise that, or that should be raised through submissions, and that can be looked at. And I guess my final point there is I've heard about the issues about negotiating the area of the ONFs and ONLs. No, we've gone through a long process. Our experts have listened and made changes. I appreciate that it's not fully what our residents want, but we have landed on what we think is a sound evidence base. There is still scope through the submission process to test those further. I know it takes a lot of time for people to be involved in submissions, but the point is we have a process that we're following, and it's there open for people to now bring forward other information and have that all assessed. And if we've got it wrong, there's another forum for that to be tested. So I'll just finish on that. Yeah.
And the Section 32 report on the SASM, Site-Specific Significance to Māori, that will be up on the website before notification, and also the ONL, ONF.
All 32s will be up. Yeah.
Cool.
And actually, there was one last point. I just was reading back through my notes, just about resource consents and the requirements in those overlays. And I'm not going to sit here and say every resource consent will be straightforward and cheap, because I know that's not the case. But I would also want to say it's not the extreme that everything will need a costly resource consent process that will need expert evidence and will require planners. It will be case by case. There should be some resource consents that are relatively straightforward, but depending on scale and complexity, there will be others that I accept will need some expert evidence. But I don't think it's a blanket statement that all of them will need experts and be costly exercise. Sorry, apologies, that's just something I missed.
Okay, we'll go into questions, starting with Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora, thank you. There was one other question that you haven't addressed yet, which was the rural zone question and the changes made from the provisions in response to the draft district plan feedback as endorsed by District Plan Review Committee on the 3rd of the 10th, 2024. I can't find that document either. Could you elucidate as to where that is? That was from Mr. Craig's question.
I can't right here and now, sorry. Yeah, I would need to look into that. Unless, do you have any idea?
Yes, so I also don't have access to it right in front of me. The minutes are typically made public through the council website on the meeting agendas and minutes page, but I don't have that right in front of me. Yeah,
so the usual process is we have the meeting, I sign the minutes, which I've done, I've got the minutes, and then they go to the next full council meeting to be endorsed, and then they're published on the website. The recommendation regarding this issue just says, I mean, for clarity, I'll bring it up just so. Councillor Mitchell, do you want to ask your question while I bring it up and read the recommendation? Councillor Parkin finish, and then we'll go to Mitchell.
Subsequent question for clarification. I have jumped onto the website to check the minutes. I can't find any minutes for that date of the meeting. There's ones before and ones after. It might be a date. It might be a typo in the date. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so they haven't gone to full council yet, so they don't go on our website until then.
Thank you. If it may be helpful, the minutes for that meeting haven't yet been published. However, the agenda for that meeting has been published. And on page 24 of that agenda, it lists the work. This work has resulted in changes to the draft district plan and goes on to summarise them: provisions to enable tourism and hospitality activities, amendments to provide for minor additional dwellings. That paper was a noting paper. We noted that. So am I right that that list in that paper of changes that were made, those are the only changes that have been made? They were outlined in that paper?
The only there might be smaller. I wouldn't want to say those are the only changes, but we would have raised what we believe are the main changes. So yes, they will be the main changes. There may be other smaller changes.
Yeah, so the agenda was published and is on our website now. That was published before the meeting. The recommendation at the meeting was that the committee notes and receives this report. That was the only recommendation that was moved. So there was no additional recommendations. It was just noting that report, which is public. And these will get signed off at the 10th of December full council meeting and be published on our website. But if anyone wants a copy, I'm more than happy to email them out now or see what the process is. But yeah, they will be made public in the usual process. Just noting that we've kind of been up against the deadline to get to this point, that we've had to have lots of meetings over the last few months to sign off some things. Councillor Parkin, did you have anything else? Councillor Mitchell, did you have a question? Yep.
Yeah, just a couple more questions based on public comment. One was to do with sites and areas of significance to Māori and restrictions that may place over a particular property. And there were some activities mentioned, beehives you've already covered off, glamping or some kind of eco-tourism stuff there. From reading through the draft plan, most of the sites out on the south coast there are Category 2 sites, and the plan has as permitted activities land disturbance as long as an accidental discovery protocol is in place, maintenance and repair of buildings, additions of new buildings for, it says an existing residential activity, but in terms of those issues that were raised, can you just clarify for us and maybe for the landowner what will and won't require resource consent based on the examples they gave?
I can speak to it to start with, and Tim can chime in if he's got something to add. Just for a point of clarification, most of those activities that you initially talked about, the beehives and glamping and others, there's no specific restriction on those types of activities within any of these sites and areas of significance to Māori. Those are more likely to be, with the beehive issue aside that Tim talked about earlier, those are more likely to be restrictions relating to the outstanding natural features and landscapes or coastal natural character areas. For the sites and areas of significance to Māori, the types of activities where there can be restrictions depending on the details of the activity and the category of the site is land disturbance, buildings, particularly new buildings, but also additions in some circumstances, and earthworks.
And you just want to really briefly, just while we're talking about SASMs, just talk a bit more about the three categories. Obviously, this is one of the topics that is kind of coming in last. I think it might be useful just for members just to get some really good clarity around those three tiers.
Yes, certainly. For the most part, there is those three tiers, Category 1, 2 and 3. Category 1 are the very significant sites that are typically still in place. They are still present, so the urupa are the most notable, I suppose, of those. Category 2 are, I guess, the next tier down. I should say in those Category 1s, there's tighter restrictions on the land use of those sites to recognise that there is something still present that can be impacted, but also the greater level of significance, I suppose, for those sites. Then Category 2 is, I guess, the next tier down, sites that are areas where there is significance, but the actual, I guess, the settlement or whatever it was that its significance is derived from is no longer present, but it's still certainly significant to mana whenua. And Category 3 is, I guess, another tier down of significance again, where there's often a lot of uncertainty about the exact location, but it's still worth recognising that there is something in this area, even if it is a narrative associated with the area, that is significant. Other sites that I'll briefly mention is all water bodies in the coastal marine area and their margins are a separate type of sites of significance where there's already restrictions on land use and development in those areas, but the significance of those areas is also recognised, and if resource consent is required for land use or development in those margins, then there's additional matters of discretion to take into account what those impacts would be on the values of the area for mana whenua. And one other one that's worth mentioning is we haven't identified marae as sites of significance because it's kind of a given that marae are they're clearly significant, but there will be ongoing development associated with marae, and it's seemed inappropriate for the district plan to be constraining those developments.
The Orongorongo precinct area is, the maps don't really easily show the different tiers between the SASMs. Is it likely before notification that you will be able to see the different colours or turn layers off to see which category of overlay is?
Yes, we can set the we can set the symbology, I suppose, of the overlay so that it will show a different colour outline or a different type of shading depending on the category. That's what we do with different categories of flood hazards, as an example. Yeah, just a different overlay, different colour. Yeah, certainly can do that.
And so the reason I ask is I was trying to work out is the privately owned land out there that has the SASMs, is it all category 2 or is there some category 1 in private ownership out there?
I'm pretty sure it's all category 2. I would have to have a quick look through all of them. There are some, there is the precinct, the wider precinct, which is identified as category 2. Then there's some specific sites associated with archaeological finds that are currently identified in the district plan. I just have to have a quick check to see whether those are also category 2. And then Tarakirai Head is also identified. But I just need to have a quick check through.
Yep. And on the question about not being consulted on these, the people that have these new SASMs on them will receive a letter to say, yep.
That's
and
correct.
Was the intention for all 3 tiers to receive a letter? I know we had a conversation about. Because obviously category 3 is just, if you find something, you need to let us know.
Sorry, the intention was category 1 and 2 only, but not 3. Yeah.
Cool. Were there any other questions? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, just a comment that although the maps don't make distinction between those categories yet, they are listed in Schedule 6, sites of significance to Māori, each of them with a category assigned.
Any other questions on SASMs while we're on this topic? No. Cool. Were there any other questions that were raised during public comment that we want further answers on, or we can kind of move into the paper and great. Cool. So I'll kind of open it up. Is there any particular topics people want to delve into? It kind of, yeah, well, obviously nearly everything in this plan has already come through us, and we've had really robust discussions and had time to think about it and made tweaks and responded to the draft feedback. So I think largely a lot of it is kind of almost a rubber stamping at this stage, but is there particular topics that, notable trees, for instance, or Deputy Mayor Lewis and then Councillor Edwards?
Oh, kia ora. Thank you, officers. I'm just wondering, that's just when you get the final, now looking at the maps, and I just want to know, have we got an anomaly in the Moira area? Because I've just noticed that's in a mixed, it's been zoned mixed use for what was used to be a reserve where the library is and the community house. And I just wondered, is there an opportunity to have it back to open reserve status or another zone? Because mixed use is pretty predominantly industrial and
I guess, well, I mean, the obvious answer is yes through the submission process, but not we wouldn't make that change now. But yeah, certainly if that zone was not correct, then that could happen through the submission process. But I think, yeah, that mixed use zone has been incorporated in the draft and now, and yeah, so yeah, but submissions, yeah.
And it's not uncommon, is it, for like the Parks and Rec team within a council to make a submission on a district plan? No. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I've got a question on the natural hazards chapter and the Three Waters chapter. The natural hazards one, and I've had a little bit of feedback, and Councillor Shaw has had a little bit of feedback too. People have seen some of the new flooding maps and how they're based on 1.5 metres of sea level rise now, which is, you know, a medium scenario, and certainly need to be aware of it. But the question is, yeah, that's a level of sea level rise that's expected in a century, in 100 years' time, and yet we're kind of putting out maps which may have insurance impacts and are certainly getting people worried. That kind of is immediate. You know, one of those maps has got the whole of the valley floor looking pretty blue. Would you have any? There's no. We certainly need to give the message to the community that this is a risk that's coming at us and you need to think about it when you're building and so on, but there's no opportunity for some sort of sliding scale of risk or some way of making people aware, yeah, when you see these maps, we're talking about in 100 years.
Well, I mean, in some respect, there is the sliding scale because there are low, medium and high risk areas, and that's how the rules effectively work. So, for instance, in the low risk area, we're not stopping development, but we're making sure that the minimum floor levels are set to the right height. So I guess there's looking at the maps and thinking this is quite scary, but when you delve into the application of them, we are effectively taking this risk-based approach to development where we allow development in low-risk areas subject to the right mitigation, but we are definitely, you know, putting strict controls on high-risk areas. So, you know, that's the approach we've put. Whether the science and evidence behind that is correct, again, I sound like a broken record, that has to be tested through that public submission and hearing process, but we're working on the basis of MFE guidance and following what we believe is a sound approach.
Yeah, if I can just chip in on that. I think this is one of the topics that we'll receive the most submissions on. It's certainly something that is of interest to a lot of people, particularly homeowners that are already starting to feel the impacts of things like risk-based mapping. We are also expecting some direction from central government on managing natural hazards through district plans in the new year. As the process proceeds, we'll have to find what's the best way to adapt to what that new direction is, which will start to give us more specific direction about how we're to identify risk areas and manage them through our district plan.
And that national direction, do we have any rough idea on timeframes for when that would come?
No, unfortunately, it's one of those ones where it may turn up all of a sudden, or it may, yeah, take a while. They've got their own processes, obviously, that they need to work through.
And if that does come while we're in the plan change process, it wouldn't come to us for any decision, it would go straight to the commissioners to make a call? Or is that crystal guy using them?
I think it will depend on the nature of the direction. If it's something that without too much change, the direction can be incorporated through the commissioner's decision, then we would suggest it's done that way. But if it's more substantial, then probably we would suggest a variation to the proposed district plan, which would come through the committee.
And would that start new consultation, new letters, that kind of thing?
If it goes through a variation process, yep. Yes, it would start the new consultation. It basically opens up the proposal for submissions again, or at least that part of the proposal for submissions. Cool.
So if the MPS comes up and says 1.5 is too low, you have to use 2.5, we'll be doing a variation and kind of restarting that part again.
Yeah, Depends on the details, but we could either do it through a variation to the proposed district plan or wait till the proposed district plan process is complete and then do a new proposed plan change to the district plan.
I wonder if we'll ever get to a stage where like the district plan is done and we can just stop work on it for a little bit. Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, you say that there will be new national direction coming, but what we see in front of us on these maps and in this plan, this is following national direction and some kind of statutory requirement / obligation. So
It's guidance rather than direction, but it is what we have. It is Ministry for Environment guidance, and then obviously, as Nathan said, the next thing will be firmer national direction, and it will probably have timeframes for implementation, and those timeframes will then dictate, picking up on Nathan's point, how we pick up on that national direction.
And the current guidance prescribes this method, the 3-tiered kind of risk factors?
I'm not sure if it gets into that level of detail about the 3-tiered kind of high, medium, low. That's, I guess, chosen as a regionally consistent approach for new plans developed in the Wellington region, certainly in the urban area. I'm not sure about Wairarapa. But the approach to taking account for climate change, both in sea level rise and increased severity of storm events, that's comes from MFE guidance.
And there was two recommendations about a medium or high scenario, and just remembering we adopted the medium scenario. Yeah.
Am I right? Was this the topic that had quite a bit of feedback around just the term high natural hazard zone? There was a bit of feedback around, can you call it something different? Am I right in assuming that the labels we're using are from the National Planning Standards, sort of, we can't make them sound less scary than they are?
Those labels aren't from the National Planning Standards. The National Planning Standards don't specify what labels are to be used for hazard risk overlays. So if you wanted to call them level 1, level 2, level 3, then you could do. I guess particularly for the high and medium hazard areas, it is in some ways sending a signal to people that there is a real thing here that either presents an existing risk or there will be a risk to whatever development is there in the future. So it does have that value of actually being, I guess, a bit more descriptive about the significance rather than kind of hiding that within, I guess, a more generic name, which is the reason that you'd go with high hazard areas, medium hazard areas.
And from a LIMS point of view, sorry.
But Nathan's point about regional consistency is relevant to that as well, because the other councils have used medium, high, medium and low. So if we went for a different approach, you've then got that, well, what does it mean in the Hutt compared to Wellington? So, yeah.
And in terms of the sea level modelling, their views, are we regionally consistent on that as well?
I'm not certain, partly because other councils had prepared their district plans before ours, so they may not have used as up-to-date sea level rise, climate change information as what has been incorporated in these areas.
Yeah, ours came in much later. And from a LIMS point of view, if people were to get a LIMS on a new property, where in the time frame would the stuff that's in our proposed plan be into a LIM? Is that like if you did a LIM today, whatever's in front of us now would be in that LIM, or is it not till the end of the 2-year process? Or
I mean, understanding what we will do is when we notify the plan, then people who get a LIM they'll be told about the proposed plan, but we won't specifically include the information, the hazard information on the LIM, because it is yet to go through that public process. So we will advise people getting a LIM that they should look at the proposed district plan, but that information won't go on a LIM until it has reached the point in time that it is, if you like, a decision. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Edwards.
Just a quick check with the 3 waters chapter. There's talk in there of discharges to stormwater discharges to waterways and stuff like that. We are not impacted by the government's pause on any new freshwater rules until they bring in the new NPSFM because we're not a regional council?
Yes, that's correct. The existing national policy statement for freshwater gives very little direction to city and district councillors. It is nearly entirely to the regional council. There's only, I guess, a generic direction to city and district councils about ensuring that there's integrated management with regional councils and that there are impacts on water bodies. I don't know the exact phrasing, but impacts on water bodies are taken into account when performing its functions around land use. So we're not affected by that.
Cool. Any other questions? Deputy Millis?
It's a process thing. Once this goes through to public in next year, are we talking about going out to the public to hear their submissions or help them with the process of writing submissions?
Yeah, so when we notify the plan in February, that's when submissions will come in. That's where the Friends of Submitter service is relevant. We, as officers, can only really answer questions, but that Friends of Submitter can offer more assistance than we can in terms of helping people to form submissions. And after that, yes, it will go to independent hearing commissioners to hear submissions.
I had one quiet question on the pre-wire ducting for EV chargers. There's a rule in there around ducting to a carport or a parking lot, but there's nothing really in there about a garage within a property, which I thought we had decided we were going to include much previously. Just wondering if you've got any knowledge about why it's not in there or if it can go in there.
Yeah, it's a piece of detail I'm not across. Do you have the standard number or rule number?
Were there any other questions while I find this?
No. I think I may have found it. So Transport Standard 8, design requirements for motor vehicle parking, circulation and manoeuvring. It says car parking spaces for residential on-site car parking spaces be electric vehicle charging ready by being serviced with an electrical cable conduit from the electricity supply to the edge of the car park. I guess the matter for interpretation is whether a car park within a garage is a car park or whether it's only exterior car parks. I'd interpret that to mean that to include car parking spaces inside a garage. So I think this covers the situation you're talking about.
Yeah, I read it as first meaning not car parks, but stuff external, sort of like a medium density where you've got rain garden in front and then parking lots over there. That's how I kind of read it. I don't know if there's some slight tweaking to the wording that makes it clear that this is even in a garage where it's quite likely you'll have the switchboard in the garage anyway, in which case it's not an issue. But if you're talking upstairs, downstairs, and the switchboard is far away, it's just that difference in pricing to run a cable through a house when there's no ducting is in the thousands versus the single digits. So
yeah, that's certainly the intention. Like, it wasn't trying to set up, I guess, a stricter standard for outdoor car parking compared to a garage.
Cool.
So I'd be happy to make that as a minor correction.
Cool. Thank you. If you just want to make a note of that, we won't bother doing an extra recommendation, but just a note on that would be great. Thank you. Any other questions? No. I've got one around water meters. So obviously we had it in the draft, and then we pulled it out for the draft, and now it's back in the proposed. Just wondering if you could talk a bit about the journey of water meters through this district plan process.
Yes, so when we brought the draft district plan to the committee last year, it included a standard requiring water meters or about water meters. The direction from the committee at the time was that we don't include that in the draft district plan because the council was about to engage on that exact thing and through the long-term plan engagement. So for that reason, it was taken out of the draft district plan to, I guess, not muddy the two engagement processes, but now we've included it back in to ensure that they are provided and required through the district plan.
And so subsequent to that, the council did decide through the LTP to introduce water meters. So now we're just aligning the district plan to say if you're building new, you do the water meter at that stage. And they'll be consistent, the same physical water meters. They won't just be putting in their own thing. It'll be part of our wider network that we're doing as part of our LTP rollout.
I'm not across the detail of the exact design requirements for water meters that would be required through the proposed district plan. I'd have to look into the detail of that.
Yeah, I guess what we don't want is people just going, oh, you have installed a water meter and it doesn't talk to our whatever we're rolling out, and then we've got to go back and retrofit anyway. But happy to leave that one with you. Councillor Edwards?
Same thing, yeah. How do people know what sort of meter to put it? They're supposed to be smart meters, aren't they? But they could install something and then find out once down the track decisions are made that their meter doesn't work with the system.
I mean, yeah, I would expect us to have a published standard that is known to everyone. I don't think it goes in the district plan because it might change, but there needs to be a standard that everyone knows, and that would be checked at building consent stage when someone is building a dwelling. So, yeah, I think it can be covered. I don't think we need to deal with it in the district plan.
Cool, awesome. Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, there is a standard noted. It's a Wellington Water standard. I guess for me, the question really is, what is the purpose of requiring people to put in water meters now, knowing that we will be installing water meters to every residence in Lower Hutt? Are we trying to, I don't know, preemptively get some in? I just feel like if we're going to do a citywide install anyway, why are we requiring anyone who builds between now and then to put one in at their own expense when we're going to be putting them in for everyone?
So this won't be a requirement from the 4th of February. So again, if I guess we've done it kind of retrospectively in terms of the decision to include water meters. So we've now included that, but if during the course of the process that changes, then obviously this won't be needed on the operative version.
So this is more to capture anyone who builds after we roll out water meters. They'll be required to install one themselves.
Correct, so yeah.
Thank you.
Any other further questions? Cool. Yeah, easy. I think we've kind of covered everything now. So we'll move on to the recommendations, unless there's any last questions. Last chance. Anything online? Oh, it's just Tony. Cool. I will bring the recommendations up onto the screen. I'll just read. Cool, so we're moving the recommendations as in the paper. We'll bring them up on the screen in a second. Just adding in a new additional recommendation after the 5th recommendation, which is on approving officers to make any further non-substantial changes. We're just adding a new one, new recommendation 6, that says ask officers to report back to the committee in 2025 with an updated proposed district plan that shows changes made subsequent to this meeting as tracked changes. Yeah. So effectively just a report showing whatever's changed between today and notification, just so it's really clear and transparent. So there'll be a new recommendation 7, which is the same as 6 in our papers, and then an additional recommendation that acknowledges and thanks the district plan team for the dedicated work over the past 5 years in preparing the proposed district plan and supporting documents. So I'd like to move those recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Edwards. Anyone wishing to speak? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
I'd just like to thank everybody for this journey that we've been on, and I'm assuming we are going to agree with the recommendations here. And I'd really like to thank the officers for their patience. There's been a lot of explaining had to be done, and I think there's going to be more once it goes public. So yeah, just for us all to be on our number one game when it does go public, to answer questions as well and to help everyone. But it's been a big ride, and I'd just like to thank everybody.
Kia ora, Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, without being repetitive, I'd like to thank officers too for their patience. I mean, you have a look at some of those Section 32 reports and just how detailed, extensive, and how they, I argue, fair, you know, really looking at the different sides of things and coming to a conclusion. And you've got to admire the amount of thought and work that has gone into them. So I thank officers for that.
Anyone else? Cool. I'll speak briefly. Yeah, just want to really thank our officers for your dedicated work over the last 5 years. It's been great having a really solid team alongside us for this whole process. Your calming nature and willingness to explain things that are quite technical, both to us and to the public, is really great. And just the reassurance and the assurity that you provide us that we are following the process. And yeah, we'll be handing this over to Deputy Commissioners to take it from here. But I'm really just assured that we have followed the best practice just from the reassurance that you've provided us. So yeah, just really want to thank you, Tim, and the team, the wider district plan team, for your amazing work. Anyone else wishing to speak? No, there was a note there from Councillor Stellinger just saying thank you to the district plan team. Cool, so I'll move the motion. All those in favour say aye. All against? Yep. Declare that carried. Cool, we'll move on to item number 8, questions. I've received no questions, so we'll move on to item number 9. Yeah, we're just going to roll straight into the full council meeting, so we won't do the closing formalities. We will do them at the end of full council meeting, which we'll roll straight into now. Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora, everyone. Okay, we ready to go for live stream? Good to go? Yep, great. Okay, now we have already had our opening karakia, as Councillor Dyer said, so we will move straight through to apologies. So I've received apologies from Councillor Briggs, Councillor Barrett, Councillor Tupou. So just acknowledging those apologies, and I'll move them. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Lewis, any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no, declare that carried. We do have, of course, Councillor Stellinger, Councillor Brown online. Public comment. So do we have any members who have registered? No? No other public comment? No? Okay, so we'll move straight through to conflict of interest declarations. Any conflicts to declare? No? Okay, so we'll move now to the recommendations from Council from the district plan meeting, which we've just held. Is there any questions? No? So I'll move the motion. We'll have those motions up on the screen. Okay, I'll move recommendations 1 through to 8. Happy to second Councillor Dyer. And I will just speak briefly. I thought I'd take the opportunity at full council to make a comment as a word of thanks as well to all of the team. I remember having a conversation at the start of this triennium with Councillor Dyer when I asked him to take on the chair of the District Plan Committee, and he gave me a bit of a sideways look, wondering, gosh, what's he going to get himself into? But I just wanted to express my thanks to you, Councillor Dyer, for your diligence, for your work with the officials of getting across what are incredibly challenging issues which are very important for our city. So just well done to you, and I know that you've put in a huge amount of effort behind the scenes. And I think that the fact that we've been able to go through a process and other councillors and those who've been around for some time would feel as, can be quite bumpy. We know we've still got some way to go. I think you've handled things incredibly well. So I just wanted to give you a particular acknowledgement alongside all of the team and the committee members for your work. So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried unanimously. Okay, so that is us. We've received no questions, so we'll go to our closing karakia. Please feel free to join me. Unahia, unahia, unahia e te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia mama, tēnā kau, tia tina, tia wairua e atu takatu. Koia re o rongo, whakeeri, aki, kia runga, kia wātia, ora, kua wātia, hau pamarie. Declare the meeting closed at 10:49